Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give it 2 minutes just for anybody coming back from lunch, just to join the call, and we'll be kicking off in a minute or two. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today on what's the future of AI in marketing. My name is Sean McMillan, and it really is my absolute pleasure to be joined today by Jeremy Waite. For those of you that don't know Jeremy, let me embarrass him and give a quick intro. Jeremy is our Chief Strategy Officer here at What's in Marketing. He has traveled all over the world delivering presentations and speaking to marketing execs about how What's in AI will revolutionize the future. He is the host of the popular 10 Words podcast and has also authored 3 books, the most recent of which is also called 10 Words. But before I pass over to Jeremy, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping tips for everybody. We will have a live Q&A after the webinar. So throughout the webinar, if you have a question, please type it into the box on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer them live on air once the webinar is finished. And trust me, I saw the slides yesterday, and this is going to be a great webinar and one you're going to want to refer back to. And to aid you in doing this, we're going to leave the webinar up for download afterwards. And to access that, it's going to be the exact same link that you use to access the webinar. So please feel free, download it, use it for reference in the coming months and years. Okay, so that's more than enough from me. Now over to you, Jeremy.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you for that very kind introduction as well. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Good morning. This is a lot more people than I thought we would get on. This is fantastic. We have people from all over the world as well. So good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending upon whereabouts you are. Let me tell you where this came from before we got started. I spend a lot of my time talking about what do we do and why do we do it and why should anybody care? And I think there was even a playful title that we put together for this, which was a WTF AI in marketing, which of course means what's the future of AI in marketing. But there's also so many myths around AI. It's going to be Festival of Marketing next week, which for those of you in the UK is one of the biggest marketing conferences that we have. And you've now got literally the world and his wife has attached the word AI to just about everything. And some of that is true, some of it's not true, some of it's just blatantly false and BS. And so what I thought would be really useful is, first of all, just to explain what AI is. We have the biggest AI platform in the world. I'm not in sales. I just want to try and give you an open view of what we've got and how it works and kind of what our view is as IBM. But also just to try and put a spotlight on some of the places that marketers go wrong, because we love to get seduced by shiny things. We're going to look at that in just a second. So I really wanted to try and look at all the myths and stuff behind the metrics as well. So look at AI, what it is, what it means, what the implications are going forward. I have visibility of quite a lot of research as well in my role. So I've with a very fast-paced, quite a visual deck. Some of you are going to be multitasking while this goes on. I'll encourage you maybe to pick on a few slides. You might want to screenshot them. You can see the deck afterwards. But it's really just to do a little bit of a brain dump about what I see about AI with the biggest challenges and where it's going to go, so that it's basically preparing you guys to try and be better at your jobs going forward. And there's a couple of reasons for this. And the main reason, I guess, to start with is we have this very strong belief. Like I said, we do a huge amount on research. We have a whole research division. We put about $6 billion a year into research as a whole. We register about 9,000 patents a year. And as it goes, about half of those are in AI, in cloud, quantum computing. So we invent a lot of very, very cool stuff with a lot of very smart people. Someone told me we actually have 6 Nobel Prize winners as part of our science and research team. And a lot of the stuff that they get to invent, people don't realize what it is. And we're going to try and show some of that today. So we're going to have some old stories. I'm going to show you some very new stories. I'm going to share with you a case study which has never seen the light of day, which is super, super exciting, which is going to speak very much to where the future of marketing is going. But the only reason I say those stats is not to kind of chest beat IBM's amazing, which obviously, of course, we are. But it's just to say that we survey a lot of people just to figure out the challenges that are going in across the industry. And our insights are showing that on average, about 4 out of 5 executives, this has probably been true for about 2.5 years now. 4 out of 5 executives, 80% of executives feel overwhelmed and underprepared for the challenges their business is going to face over the next 5 years. Now, what I'm going to try and do throughout this webinar is not just try and give you a few insights into AI, but I'm also going to make a case that the next 5 years are probably going to change more than the last 20. Now, that's quite a big statement. That's the headline right there, isn't it? You know, we've gone through a lot of disruption. We've just had the 10-year anniversary of Lehman going down. You know, we've just had the 20th anniversary of Garry Kasparov losing to IBM in that famous Deep Blue match, the chess game a while ago. We'll cover all of that in just a second. But it's really just to try and set the scene so that you guys know where it is that we're going to be heading over the next hour, because a lot of this, how can I put this? A lot of this feels like we're talking about innovation. It feels like we're just talking about all these shiny new technologies that do wonderful things that help you to do your job faster, or helps you to run your business faster, or to compete faster. Maybe you're a small company trying to compete with a big company. And just like social media did years ago, AI is now allowing the playing field to be flattened. So the smaller companies can use this really transformative technology to compete with the big companies. Some people mistakenly call that innovation, but I just wanted to point out at the top that all innovation is doing the same thing as everybody else a little bit faster. Which is a great line I heard from my friend Brian Solis, one of the best analysts, I think, in the marketing industry. And what Brian went on to say is that actually innovation and disruption, and a lot of marketers get this mixed up, because if innovation is just doing the old thing faster than everybody else, then disruption is doing a new thing that makes the old thing obsolete. Completely different point of view, isn't it? A new thing that makes the old thing obsolete. Bill Gates, I think, a couple of years ago said that whole thing that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't apply anymore. Because what he says is if it ain't broke, it's obsolete. You know, that's where the original move fast and break things mentality came from at Facebook. Now that's got them into a little bit of trouble over the years, and we're looking at some type of stable infrastructure, which is where Facebook have now pivoted to. But really, everyone in the tech industry, IBM included, is looking at how to disrupt markets. And if there's one technology most likely to disrupt over the next couple of years, it's certainly going to be AI. Now, we'll also look at things like quantum in just a second, because that's where the world's going to go after the next 5 years. But let me just start with this idea that maybe you're not expecting. And we'll get into some of the stats and the data in just a second. I'm going to set the scene and just show you some of the data that might knock your socks off. Absolutely up to the minute, 2018 going into 2019 stats about the state of the marketing industry. But before we do all of that, let me just share with you one of my favorite people in the world. This is Stephen B. Johnson. This is Stephen with a V. Did some amazing TED Talks, anthropologist, really great philosopher, did a fantastic TED Talk that Chris Anderson actually curated into this little 8-minute slot, little kind of paper cutout animated video. You've absolutely got to go and check it out, because what Stephen B. Johnson said in the middle of this TED Talk, he said, look, if you want to see where the future's going, you want to look where people are having the most fun. Right? We don't play enough. And in fact, Chris Dixon, who's the blockchain VC that heads up the big Silicon Valley VC company, Andreessen Horowitz, Chris Dixon said in a blog post that went viral a couple of years ago, he said, if your work is going to look like in 10 years' time, just look at what really smart people are doing for fun at the weekends. So I only wanted to set that up because a lot of this technology, which I'm about to talk to you about, has come out of play. It's come out of our researchers and our scientists just playing with cool stuff to see what is possible. And sometimes the commercial intent comes afterwards. And that's important to remember because I think some marketers have forgot what it's like to have fun. We're so deep in the technology and the analysis and the reports and the data and architecture, MarTech seems to have taken over. Sometimes we forget about the creative side of going away and having fun. And Stephen B. Johnson, honestly, check out his talk. He goes through the history of technology going back thousands of years and says at every single moment in time, when something cool has been invented that went on to revolutionize the world, something truly disruptive, it always started from someone playing with technology. So just have that in the back of your mind as we go through these slides, because that's really what I want to encourage you to do. Because as we go through some of this stuff, what you're going to see very quickly is that the case studies I'm talking about are brand new, incredibly cutting-edge emerging technologies, and a lot of them don't even exist in marketing at the moment. That's why I'm so proud not just to be giving this talk, but because you guys are here listening, because you've obviously got an appetite and a hunger to try and have that competitive edge. And there's a lovely line from Seth Godin. He once said, one of my favorite marketing authors, Seth Godin said, if you wait until there's a case study in your industry, you waited too long. That's a great line, isn't it? And that's really some of these technologies. When you look at something like the Gartner Hype Cycle, and I've just taken this as a shot, this comes out once a year. It's a great report. You should absolutely get your paws on it if you can find it. Speak to your Gartner rep, or I'm sure your companies have got a handle on that. A lot of this has been shared on Twitter a whole bunch of times. But really all this is showing is the shiny technologies that marketers get excited about. And we love getting excited about shiny, shiny things. And basically what this means, all this chart is showing you, it's called the law of diffusion of innovation, for those of you familiar with, Simon Sinek and that law of hyped technologies coming in, and then at what point they mature and become mainstream. And all this chart is really saying is that when something becomes mainstream, arguably that's when 40% of the industry has adopted it. But in that innovation trigger, that little column on the left-hand side, that's when less than 3% of the industry has adopted it. So these are all the topics that we see floating around in Wired, in Fast Company. When you go to conferences, I'm sure it'll be at Festival of Marketing next week, just like it was at DeMexco last month, or South by Southwest, or Cannes, or Summit, all of these big technology conferences. Dreamforce was last week. People talk about all the things on the left-hand side, whereas it's often the things on the right-hand side, or the things that have fallen off the graph, like email marketing and personalization, that are so mature they show economic value. And I'm just going to pick on one in just a second, but the quote that I like to sum this up has actually came from the guy that invented Wired magazine himself, Kevin Kelly. Now, Kevin Kelly wrote an amazing book called The Inevitable, the 12 tech forces that are going to shape the future. You should absolutely go and read that. Puts it into language that every guy on the street can understand about the forces that are going to shape the next few years. And what Kevin Kelly says is that there's no business case for innovation. You should perfect what you know first. And that's to say that sometimes you get excited about the new thing coming through. I was at a conference last week with some very senior CMOs. Blockchain for advertising was absolutely dominating the conversation. How blockchain is going to turn the whole advertising supply chain upside down. But yet, the majority of businesses in that room weren't even sharing their own customer data between their own sales, marketing, and customer service teams. So that's what Kevin Kelly says when there's no business case for innovation. He's like, make sense of the data that you've got before you start investing in some of these sexier things on the left-hand side. Now, of course, it's exciting. That's why you guys are on this webinar today. But what you'll see that came on the chart for the first time last year is AI for marketing. And you'll also see that it's got a little blue dot next to it, which is really what that's saying is that 3% of the industry is currently looking at AI, and it's going to at some point mature into the business strategy of an organization over the next 5 to 10 years. Now let's take some Q&A afterwards about whether or not you guys think that's true. And by all means, grill me with as many technical and complicated future-gazing questions as you can about sort of strategy and the reality of where this should or shouldn't live within your business strategy. Because whilst I know that it is a very hyped technology and it is very early days, I certainly don't think it's 3% that's going to mature over 5 to 10 years. In fact, with e-consultancy last year, I did some independent research. Nobody knew it was IBM at the time, and I commissioned marketers across the UK and Western Europe to say, okay, who's putting AI into their marketing strategy, and over what period of time are you looking at implementing this? And what I found out was quite different. I found out that it was 28% of senior marketers were going to put AI into their strategy at some point over the next 18 months to 2 years. Now, that tells you something interesting. That tells you that there's still a window of opportunity where nobody else is looking at some of this technology because they haven't figured out what to do with it yet. But it also shows that the rate of adoption is much faster than people expect. So that's really the main takeaway from this. But since we're kicking things off about AI, it would be remiss of me not to give you the official explanation according to what analysts like Gartner think it is. So here we go. Artificial intelligence for marketing. AI for marketing comprises of systems that change behaviors without being explicitly programmed based upon data collected. Usage analysis and other observations from marketing use cases. This enables technologies and techniques, and this is going to include machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing. Now, this could be anything from an AI looking at vast amounts of data. I was with a large, I'm going to say, fitness company this morning. They're looking at an AI that can figure out the hashtag of when somebody says something, and the AI can then search every single post that they ever post and then try and see the mood and the emotional intent and the personality of that individual based upon every post that they've done. But the initial trigger is them using a hashtag of this specific product. And then you can start looking at audiences and moods and behaviors and predicting what's going to happen next. Now, there's something interesting in that as a point, because when I say predicting, what we're finding at the moment, and I'm not going to name any names, but you may know who they are. There are some big marketing clouds out there claiming that they've got an AI. A lot of the time, all it is a very clever predictive engine, or maybe even prescriptive. It's not showing what's going to happen next. It's maybe giving you an insight. The data says this. We think this is going to happen next. And because of that, you should do that. And a lot of it is rules-based, and there's some element of machine learning maybe, but that's not AI. We'll look at exactly what AI is in just a minute. But it's very, very careful that you distinguish between AI and predictive, because AI is really looking at unstructured data, massive, massive amounts of data. Think about it. 90% of all the data in the world was created in the last 12 months. That's insane, right? And it's going to double over the next 18 months, almost in line with Moore's law, about 66% year on year. So the fact that data is doubling every 18 months, 90% of it was created in the last year, and we're looking at all the data that a business is sat on, about 80% of it is unstructured. It's video, it's voice, it's text, it's going to be things from social media, from IoT, from connected products, from a million different places. This isn't the structured data, like things that live within spreadsheets, things that are tagged properly, that live within your database, your CRM. That's structured data. That, for example, is what Salesforce might do with something like Einstein. What a true AI is going to do, like Watson, that we'll look at in a second, is making sense of the vast amounts of data that's unstructured. Now, the key, which we're going to look at in a second as well, which is not getting too seduced by innovation and AI. There was a line that Gartner used when I was listening to a webinar the other day. They said, here's the best piece of advice we could give to any marketer. Focus near-term AI initiatives on data-centric, time-intensive marketing challenges. So that's the big win. There's loads of amazing things AI is going to do, and I'm going to knock your socks off in a minute with some of those use cases. But the best thing that you could do is just looking at how you can process large amounts of information very, very quickly. And something like Watson, very open architecture. I'm going to show you how you can access him for free and play with him later on. But he's able to process about 10 million records a second. So he makes that process of automating data manipulation analysis very, very quick. And again, that's a competitive analysis that you can get from small companies competing with big companies. So that's setting the scene. Now we're going to have a little bit of a whirlwind trip over the next 5 or 10 minutes just through where we are at the moment and why this is important. So hold on to your hats. If you want to screenshot some of these stats, I don't know if you're doing other stuff at the same time, you might want to steal some of these slides and some of these numbers as we go through them, because this is going to be a bit quick. Let's start off with looking at things from a brand perspective. 3/4 of the world's top brands are going to lose 1/5 of their brand equity by 2020. If you're not a CMO on this line right now, and I can see a few of you, or if you're not a VP, director, head of, or got aspirations to be a CMO, if you're not terrified, especially if you've not got a B2C company, if you're a brand that has a big consumer face, the fact that brands are going to lose 20% of their brand equity. So this is the sort of stuff that's measured by Interbrand. Their new Interbrand Global 100 report comes out in next week, I think it is. You're going to lose that within the next 2 years, 1/5. That's pretty scary stuff. And here's the reasons why. Social media polarization. Social media doesn't work in the way it used to. We'll look at that in just a second. Inflammatory content. I don't need to tell you what that is. Ad blocking. I don't need to tell you what that is. Lots of people switching that off. I'm going to give you some data for that in a second. Corruption in the ad supply chain. What about that? What about those 3-second video views that live on a tab 5 tabs deep that the customer's not even seen, but yet it tracks it as a view? And then you have this consolidation of power when you have a few big players owning the majority of the pie. Facebook and Google in digital have about 70% of all the traffic. And you have CMOs of some very big companies quite uncomfortable at the moment because they think that Google and Facebook may know more about their customers than they do. So that's a shift in the marketplace for sure. What else have we got? Well, what about the data? 55% of consumers no longer want to provide any personal data to marketers. That's pretty scary stuff. That's quite spicy. I heard that stat last year. I've checked it out again. It still seems to be current. eMarketer backs that up, and you probably know that this is true from your own examples. It's getting harder and harder to get people's data. We've got to create a compelling experience first based upon anonymous data, sometimes emotions, sometimes personalities. Understanding the mood of an audience is super, super important. We can't just capture people's data anymore. That's what we used to do. We used to get people to sign in with Twitter or Facebook Connect or give me a mobile, email, date of birth, whatever. Customers don't want that anymore. We've got to provide different experiences. Gartner actually calls that personification, not personalization. Right message to the right person at the right time. Well, you don't have their information. That's one of the key areas where AI can help, because it can understand emotional intent based upon anonymous data. Huge, huge play. Can't overemphasize that enough. B2C companies, especially the more emotional something is. At Facebook, we used to call them passion pillars: music, TV, fashion, film, sports. Up to 90% of conversations are now in messaging apps. They're no longer on those public forums. Maybe you can scrape the comments on Instagram, like I just mentioned, whether you're Pinterest, God forbid, you might want to scrape the comments on YouTube and see all the car crash of conversations that are going on there. Public Facebook, etc., etc. A lot of that stuff just doesn't take place in public anymore. Private messaging apps, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, WeChat, Line, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, DMs. People even sending URLs on emails. So that's changed a lot over the last 2 years. So what we do is we find ourselves in this place where marketing, in many cases, is now the least trusted profession in the boardroom. So what about that when you find that not only are less marketers than ever before on executive boards, but 80% of CEOs, according to Harvard, say they don't trust their CMOs anymore. In fact, a recent survey I saw a couple of weeks ago, 67,000 executives and less than 2% were marketing. Marketing has a bad rep in the boardroom, and we need to get that back, and we need to get back that credibility by showing true economic value on what it is that we do, and stop measuring some of the BS metrics that are very fluffy around reach and impressions and all that kind of stuff that we know doesn't mean anything to people outside of the marketing industry. If I was you, I'd want to impress the CTO and the CFO more than the CMO. That's how you're going to succeed in business, certainly with your marketing efforts. And just to wrap this up, here's the last one, because it sets the scene for some of the IBM stuff I'm going to show you in just a second. Told you this was going to be fast, didn't I? Hope you're still with me. Hope this is all okay. The average employee wastes about 1 day of their week searching for information that helps them to do their jobs. About 19.8% of time. That's, again, where AI can help. You have the world's best assistant by your side that knows everything that you've ever said. You ask him a question. I say him. You see, I'm referring to Watson in my case, selfishly. In cases that we've seen, every time you ask him a question, it saved you 4 hours and he's giving you a response back in 15 seconds. You think what that's going to do for the future of agile, of cutting back the traction between agencies and analysts and partners and going backwards and forwards trying to run some of these reports. Now, again, quick fly-by-night of where the industry is, because in 2018, it's assumed that there's about 100 AI startups having the majority of the share of voice in the press. Now, this was at the beginning of the year. There was 100. I actually checked about 6 weeks ago, and it's 1,600 already, gone from 100 to 1,600. Think about that. Think about where Scott Brinker's landscape came from. I know you're sick to death of seeing this. I've shown this a bunch of times, but the reason I love it is because 7 years ago, Scott said there was 100 technology companies trying to help you connect with your customers faster. And then he started to measure them, knowing what the industry was going to do, and it just got bigger and bigger, didn't it? Went from 100 in 2011 to 350. Then we went in 2014, 947, 1,876, 3,876, 5,300 last year, about 4,800 unique. Now, what's interesting of those logos, half are startups and half have got less than 5 staff. That creates its own set of problems. And this year, we're even over that, 6,829 companies claiming that they do almost the same thing. And when you look at the company that I work for, IBM, and you look at the footprint that we've got, and especially AI, and I'm going to show you some examples of that in just a second, this is the only salesy bit, I promise you. This is the only bit where I'm going to even sound a tiny bit salesy. We're the only company in the world that has 28 of 49 categories. Adobe, Salesforce, Oracle, SAS, SAP, even all the small point solutions, your Pegas and HubSpots, don't even come close. 28 of 49 categories, we have a footprint in this. The misconception is that we're expensive to deal with. We can get into that later on, but the small use cases, that is absolutely not true. So as you go through your job and your career and you're listening to the news and you're looking at the hype cycles and you're going to conferences, just think back to this chart over the next few years, because where we are at the moment is just going to look like absolute chaos over the next few years. So there's never been an easier time to do your job, even though it does feel very overwhelming with where we are at the moment. So you need to keep up, and you really, really need to invest in this stuff and some of your time looking at some of those emerging technologies. But more importantly, understanding specific use cases. So let me give you a few little examples. Like I said, 20 years ago, just over 21 years ago, IBM beat Garry Kasparov, who was an unbeaten grandmaster. He won the first game. We built an AI computer. It was really just a very predictive, fast. He called it a $10 million alarm clock, which was quite nice. But he also said that IBM destroyed his life when we won. What was nice when he wrote his book, Smart Thinking, he said, 1997 was really the year of intelligent machines. This is where machines got smart. And this was really the origins of where AI, commercial AI, started to take off. Now, this was over 20 years ago. Now, what's nice is that he's come full circle, and I was chatting to him a couple of months ago, and he said, really, the best view is a good human and a machine is the best combination, not one or the other. Now, also, you remember at the top I said, when you're looking for fun, you know, you want to see where the future's going, look where people are having the most fun. We built this for fun, for a chess game. We built it for fun, for a game show. We won Jeopardy. Natural language processing, a very complicated game show where you're given the answer, you've got to figure out the question. And the natural language processing that Watson did, we started building him in 2006, matured in 2008. We won the game show in 2011. Now, this is something fascinating I want to point you towards, because just a couple of months ago, a story that's even bigger than Jeopardy is the AI engine within Watson that was put head-to-head with the world's 2 top debaters. So you can see there the 2 top debaters. You can see Project Debater in the middle. Just for fun, when you finish this, go away on YouTube, go and search Project Debater IBM. And what you're going to see is a very, very articulate Watson using language and taking from a corpus of tons and tons of information to have a real-time debate. There's no machine learning. This is just pulling from millions and millions of articles across the web, across Wikipedia, from social media, from looking at all the headlines going back years and years of the New York Times in order to have debates around the future of education. Should we subsidize space exploration, for example? And Watson won. And you've got a computer, this isn't biased, you've got a computer that has to make a case against these debaters to try and convince people in the audience to change their minds. This really, really was, something that was absolutely revolutionary at the time. So Project Debater, hopefully there, what you can see on your screen. Let me just make sure that the webinar is working here. It looks like you're still seeing Jeopardy. Let me push that to the audience. Okay, somebody mention in the webcam if you can see this okay here. But hopefully what you can see, there we go, is Jeopardy. Okay. Now what you're seeing on your screen is the next generation of this. This is Summit. And again, just have a look just to try and see where the world is going, because what Summit is the world's biggest supercomputer. It's a cloud-based computer. And this is a real-time cloud-based computer that can do in one day what it would take a human 13,000 years to do. That's just crazy, isn't it? 13,000 years. And then what's happened is we built this again. We built it for fun. We've built it to try and stop things like the amount of time that's spent on clinical research trials. You look at things like Memorial Sloan Kettering. We built Watson in 2011, and straight away we put it into oncology, trying to help physicians to try and make smarter decisions about what to do. And again, for fun, what we did is put it straight into Wimbledon. These slides are changing quite fast, so I hope you guys are with me. I hope you can see this. Now, Wimbledon is a great example, and let me tell you why. Because this is just another use case of AI, and then I'm going to show you, we're going to put some meat on the bones in just a second, because Wimbledon has 70 million fans. And those fans are only loyal for about 3 weeks of the year. Now, the interesting thing about that is that it's very, very important that Wimbledon is able to maximize customer engagement in a very, very small amount of time with a phenomenal amount of information in order to try and provide more compelling experiences, again, without asking for people's data. So what they did is they came to IBM in order to try and solve some of the problems and automate some of the stuff that they got bogged down in doing. And one of the things that they did was the highlights. Now, if you go on Wimbledon.com, if you look on YouTube, if you look at any of the highlight packages for Wimbledon, you'll see something interesting in 2018. And I'm going to show you here a picture of what this looks like. We don't often show this screen very often. This is cognitive highlights because 2018 was the first year where an AI did 100% of the highlights with no human involvement whatsoever. We went back to 1877 with all the data and taught Watson tennis. We went back to the beginning of our partnership with Wimbledon in 1990, 53 million points. And then he learned how to play the game and he learned how to watch. There was video tagging and there was voice tagging. You can see excitement levels of the audience. And Watson created the highlight packages completely on his own. So it freed up the Wimbledon team to go off and be more spontaneous with social media posts, with creating content of something that happened in the crowd. And it's completely changed the way that they work because they're going through a transformation. Wimbledon isn't really a tennis championships. Wimbledon wants to compete on broadcasting. They want to be a media producer. They want to compete with the BBC and ESPN and Sky. And they're using AI to do that, to speed up those things that could previously have been done by a team, but that's automated. Now that team goes off to do better stuff. And there's a great example I can show you here. If you see the FIFA World Cup highlight machine, again, this is a use case of AI, just pointing you at different examples at the moment. You can go and Google them afterwards. This was phenomenal. Think about the World Cup. 3.4 billion people watch the World Cup. It's about 46% of the world's population. Fox Sports was looking at that data and realizing that of those 3.4 billion people, most of them only needed to watch 1 minute of game footage for them to be tracked as a viewer. So when you're looking at Fox Sports in the US that's trying to grow its base, it's looking at 280 million people online, and it's trying to get them to engage for as long as possible. So what we did is we looked at the FIFA World Cup highlight machine and we fed in every single second of video footage going back to 1958. And just like we did with Wimbledon, now what you've got is that fans can go and they can ask any team, any player, any match, any play type, fouls, red cards, goals. And Watson, based upon 1 million hours of archive footage, can create personalized highlight package, which then got shared on social media. And as you imagine, the viewing figures and engagement levels shot through the roof. Now, the reason I want to share that with you, because here's the data. This is why some of this stuff is important. And like I said, I'm going to show you where you can go to get this in just a minute. Early adopter brands, according to Gartner, are showing that brands that redesign their websites, now that doesn't have to be a startup, could be an existing brand that's re-optimizing their site at the moment, but you re-optimize your site for visual and voice search, they're likely to increase hardcore digital revenue by 30% by 2021. Now, when you think that by 2022, 50% of all browsing behavior is going to happen without a screen, things like voice technology and visual tagging technology, these are all the APIs that live within things like Watson and AI that can help you to do that. That's going to be the basis of these brands that are able to compete and disrupt. Now, the reason that this is important as well, I'm looking at a report right now from Rich Relevance, and it's showing that across the UK, it's looking at UK, France and Germany, only 25% of the industry are aware that some of this technology exists. And in fact, what it did is it went and surveyed marketers to say, do you think this is creepy or do you think this is cool? In fact, you can Google it. The report's called Creepy or Cool. And what it showed is that the top 5 creepy technologies, according to consumers, are targeting with ads on your phone based upon your location to shops, geofencing, voice assistants within your home, listening and making recommendations, and emotion detection technology, adapting your shopping experience based upon your mood. Now, these are all the technologies that are completely open, based upon anonymous data, but at the moment, people are kind of freaked out a little bit, and they don't know how to make sense of all of that stuff. So this is our challenge as marketers, not just to understand what is possible, but just because you can measure things, right, doesn't mean that you should. We'll think about that in the Q&A maybe in about 10 minutes, because just because some of this stuff is available, we've also got to think about the morals and the ethics of how you use this and what the intent of your audience is. Some people are the early adopters, like they're on the hype cycle, but some are the laggards. Some people wouldn't be comfortable knowing you could understand their emotions based upon their posts or their images, right? You can read 500 things from a photograph. They wouldn't be comfortable you serving them a message based upon their mood, not upon what they've said. So if you want to have a look at a case study, again, I told you I was going to dump a whole load of stuff on you. If you want to look at a case study of where this has gone, just go into ibm.com/music. And what you're going to see is a guy that I'm working with at the moment, absolute rock star called Alex da Kid. He's the producer of Eminem, of Rihanna, of Imagine Dragons, Nicki Minaj. What we did last year was help to build the world's first AI-powered pop song. Now, that was fascinating because we fed in about 25 years worth of Billboard 100s. We fed in the last 5 years of news articles and updated articles from Wikipedia. And then we applied all of Alex da Kid's social audience, which is huge, to understand the mood of the audience in accordance with those news articles. And based upon that, we helped him to write a song. So it's a huge use case of how AI could be used to understand what people are saying on social and to trigger some type of event or piece of content. Now, we went one stage further this year. This is a brand new case study. I've only ever shared this once before. What we did this year is we found out that Alex was wasting so much of his time trying to find new artists, and he was working with her, H.E.R, you can see on the screen there, that he wanted to try and figure out if AI could help him to find an artist. So this is where AI comes into its own, right? Find a meaningful signal in a noisy environment. Huge amounts of data, try and find somebody that's unsigned. It's like I want a female artist from America that uploads one song a month. She's got a certain amount of downloads and she sings about certain things. So using the Music Intelligence API within Spotify, and you can see the videos on YouTube, we went to search 2.5 million artists. We looked on 1,600 music genres, listened to those songs, listen to the tone, the sentiment, the personality insights. And based upon that, we were able to find an artist that Alex da Kid could then go off and sign. And she did the collaboration, the backing vocals for her. Now, just think about that for a second. Think about that for the future of influencer marketing, of finding the key people that are really talking about your brand, of looking at strategic partnerships. I was with MLB, NFL, NBA last week, looking at sponsorships. Think about the implications for that. Formula One, are you looking at who to work with, what collaborators? It's exactly the same engine, exactly the same engine. So as we start to bring this to a wrap in the next 5 minutes, let me just give you a couple of the technical bits. And again, this is a page that you might want to screenshot. Go and have a look at this. This article was called Artificial Intelligence for the Real World. And I really like it because just like Kevin Kelly said, don't start with moonshots. You know, there's no business case for innovation. Perfect what you know first. Don't always invest in the shiny stuff. If your customer service, your marketing, your sales isn't joined up properly, most businesses don't do that. But make sure that AI in some small case, and I'll show you where to start just in a sec, in some small case, make sure that you're at least starting somewhere. But the important thing for this webinar is to understand that when we say AI, it could actually mean a couple of different things because you've got 3 different types of AI. I'm not going to read off the bullet points to you now, but you see the process automation or cognitive insights or cognitive engagement. Really what that's doing is it's looking at different types of AI. Some of that may be robotics and automation stuff. Could help within marketing for CRM, but making you smarter is often one of the best things for AI, detecting patterns in large volumes of data. Cognitive engagement is what I work with on the Watson customer engagement side. Also includes things like chatbots, make those product recommendations, even if they're based upon visual or voice search. So let me just show you a quick example of that in just a second. And again, I just wanted to give you some of the technical side, and this is independent. So again, you can see just to get a little bit of knowledge, trying to inform and inspire, right? Some of the most common examples of AI according to IDC, again, that's the definition there. You're looking at deep learning, machine learning, and conversational systems. I'm trying to squish about 40 hours of content here into about 45 minutes, but go and have a look at that. Now, of course, I'm very proud of this because it shows that IBM is miles ahead of anybody else. We're the only leader in AI marketing at the moment, probably about 18 months ahead of anybody else in the industry. Hopefully it stays that way. We'll see where that goes. But if you to look at this platform itself, and then I said I'll leave you with a few examples, it's actually really simple. You can go on to ibm.com/Watson right now. You can scroll halfway down the page and click on Build With or Developer Tools. And what you're going to see is loads of APIs, all the free demos, SDK kits for you to mess with within your team. And you'll see how we process unstructured data, whether it's voice, whether it's visual search like Alex the Kid and Wimbledon, whether it's making sense of unstructured data and then mapping that to CRM or speech to text, whatever it is, for something to be truly AI, not predictive, not prescriptive, truly AI, it has to do those 4 things. It's got to understand, reason, learn, and interact. So when I start thinking about all the unstructured data and you start thinking about where that data is coming from, you've got the open API system. This is the part of the business that I work in. We've got marketing, commerce, and supply chain. And really, it's just taking that data together. This is the unstructured data that you guys have got to make sense of. And you can't because you can't keep up because it's doubling in time every 18 months. It's like the 4 Ps of marketing. You know, really what we should be looking at now is splitting that down into people, places, and products. And all of those different sources of information can be processed by an engine like Watson. So I'm not going to speak to this because it would feel like I'm trying to sell you a product, but that's basically what Watson marketing is, with all the different elements of how it pulls any piece of data from any source, from any vendor, anywhere in the world, and sticks it all into one place. That's basically what we do. If you want to screenshot this, these are the 9 use cases of how marketing could help with AI. So this is true AI in marketing, and you can have a look at those. You can Google those and see afterwards. Couple of quick examples. You could look at the northface.com/XPS and you'll see the world's first AI-powered website. Doesn't ask you for any information. It's about 2 years old now. Makes recommendations that have been automatically tagged from someone uploading 75,000 products at the North Face side. Watson's tagged them all, making recommendations based upon mood and the weather. Net-a-Porter, we did a hackathon the other day. You can upload your favorite celebrity photograph, tells you exactly what they're wearing and where you can go and buy it from. That's called cognitive fashion. And there's some interesting stuff that we're doing around that. So last 3 or 4 slides. I hope this is interesting. I told you it was a little bit of a whirlwind. If I could bring all of this together, and I'm not going to do the demo now, but we could talk about it because I want to leave, like I said, 15 minutes for Q&A. We have something called the Watson Marketing Assistant. Now, when I go on stage or I'm speaking to CMOs in private boardrooms, this is usually the thing that I show. Because traditional marketing would take about 30 days to do what I would do using my voice in 15 minutes. and I can build a campaign. You can see in the bottom corner there, 143,000. This particular demo is actually fixing a campaign with 62 million records in email, looking at the subject line and the emotions that people feel when they look at that natural language. And we're fixing the campaign based upon my voice, with people asking Watson questions about why did this email campaign not work. Now, normally you go backwards and forwards to analysts and agencies to be able to do this. And this is me with no technical knowledge asking Watson to try and help fix it. The reason this is important, friends, on the line is that IDC is recommending that people need to be looking at this now, because within 10 years, within less than a decade, 66% of all business apps will be built by people with no coding experience whatsoever using APIs like this. So it's so important to understand it now, exactly what it is and how it can help. Of course, there's lots of other alternatives out there. Watson's doing some pretty interesting stuff, so you're welcome to go and check him out. But let me leave you with this as a thought. We've talked about AI. The best way to think about this is not even augmented intelligence. That's the language that IBM uses. We're using engines like this to augment human behavior. What you should be doing is thinking about it like an intelligent assistant. This is not something that's going to destroy jobs, take jobs away, all that kind of stuff. This is an intelligent assistant that helps you to do your job faster. Why? Because we waste about 90% of our time searching for stuff, whether that's reports and dashboards or metrics, or like Alex the Kid, you're searching for an artist. So we started with Garry Kasparov, so let's finish with him, because this isn't about Watson taking over. This isn't about jobs being replaced. This isn't about intelligent machines replacing content teams at Wimbledon. This is about good humans working with machines to provide compelling insights for customers, because of all those stats that we shared about the landscape changing pretty quick. So the technology, of course, it's wonderful. Of course, it's amazing. But what's important is that we have faith in people. They're good and they're smart. If we give them the right tools, like some of the ones that you've seen today, you will hopefully do something truly wonderful and magical with them. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We've gone through 45 minutes of super fast quickfire content. Providing you're all still with me and you're all okay, let me hand back to Sean and see if we're taking questions from people. And feel free to drop something in the chat and I'll answer any questions on anything you like, something I skimmed over too fast you want to know more about, let me know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Jeremy. So we do have quite a few questions. So the very first one is this something I can use? I run a small marketing agency for my small clients. They might not generally have more data than Google Analytics, plus possibly a small customer base.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where I would start with that? And I was with one of our agencies this morning, actually, so that's a great question, because it was, with all respect to my friend who I was with, a very, very small agency, limited budget, limited data as well. There's something called personality insights. So when I pointed you towards that page, ibm.com/Watson, you look at the developers, you scroll down, you'll see personality insights as a tool. In fact, if you search back my tweets, you'll probably see a link that I've shared. What Personality Insights does is it understands the mood of your audience. It could scrape Twitter, everything that's been publicly quoted. But what you can also do is you can put in websites. You could put in any amounts of raw text or any white paper. And here's the reason why it's really interesting, why it's so good, especially for small businesses, because it only needs 6,000 words to be accurate. To understand the mood of an audience, how do they respond to this campaign or this message, or this copy that I'm thinking, even a speech that you've written. I've used this a bunch of times for speeches to understand how an audience might get it. 6,000 words is about 1 hour of talking. It's a couple of white papers, but you can just copy and paste that in. And you can see straight away with a level of confidence exactly how Watson has done that. Off the top of my head, for anybody that wants to type this in now, I think it's Gwen, Gwen systemu.mybluemix.net. You can go and play with that right now, and you can understand the mood of your audience, even if you've only got a small amount of people. Play with it on your own Twitter. Play with it on your company or your client's Twitter, and you'll have some fun with that. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. So second question, and I think this was asked on the slide with the Gartner hype cycle. So the question is, you said 28% will integrate AI in their strategy for the next 3 years. In which business, I assume that's meant to be business, is it going to be all customer products, metal industry, machine manufacturer, etc.? Question mark.
Yeah, isn't that a great question? Because there's nothing worse than somebody standing at the front of a stage or in a webinar throwing out a generic number as if it's going to apply to everybody. I love that Winston Churchill quote, the only stats you can trust are the ones you falsified yourself. I really like that. We could make numbers mean anything. Marketers are great at that. No, the context for that was I went out to 1,000 marketers across Western Europe and the UK. These are senior marketers, so really anyone that's ahead of or above, director level, VP, CMO. And they were from a whole cross-section. There was a huge amount of financial services, but it was a cross-section of B2B and B2C. The fastest use cases are probably going to come from consumer products, certainly CPG. One of the reasons for that is because you don't always have a direct relationship with the customer. You think about a Unilever, Procter & Gamble, General Mills, Nestle. You don't always have a direct relationship, so you need to rely on anonymous data to try and understand what to do next with audiences, whether that's creating an advert, whether that's trying to understand the impact that your comms may have had worldwide in different markets. Really interesting for CP. Financial services, by far. They're going to be the ones that jump on AI the fastest, mostly because of the operational cost savings. Customer service for sure, and chatbots. I'm seeing at the moment companies like RBS and Vodafone. I can't give the numbers, but dramatic reductions in cost savings, much faster call times, huge drops in the cost to serve customers, and as a result, increased customer satisfaction, because now you've got a bot that can understand natural language processing. You're not on a line waiting for someone for a basic task. You've got Watson understanding and having a real conversation, and you're able to answer those real-time questions super fast with a very, very high level of accuracy. That's the reason I point out Project Debater, by the way, because when you go and look at that on YouTube, you'll see how accurate and how compelling Watson is in understanding the way that humans respond. Customer service is probably going to be the biggest use case, I think. But as far as that data, it really is a cross-section. 28% going to be adopting it over about 18 months. Some industries are going to be slower than others. Retailers like Nike have been jumping on it for quite a while, Coca-Cola for sure. But yeah, if you work in financial services, big opportunity, telcos as well, customer service.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. So a slightly longer question here, but it's a great question nevertheless. Could Watson's social sentiment analyzer help us to find people ready to listen about how we might be able to help them increase their revenue? And just the second part of that question, Jeremy, is either by crafting content on platforms like Facebook or in some way to actually find the people, like new customers.
Well, the easy answer to that is yes. That's when you're looking at social sentiment. And here's why. When you look at Watson is really, it's worth clearing up what Watson is, because, again, he covers a multitude of sins. What Watson basically is a massive toolbox of APIs, these application programming interfaces. It's just a toolbox of stuff that helps you do things really fast. People mistake it for this great big AI supercomputer that just you feed things in and magical stuff happens. It takes a lot of people to make Watson work, and it takes a lot of training with real data to make Watson work as well. And something like social media sentiment is no different. Personality Insights is a good example, because you can feed a Twitter account in and it shows you straight away the sentiment, and it starts to show you, we've got sentiment analyzer, tone analyzer, personality insights, 3 different APIs, that show you the mood of the audience. Now, where this is interesting is when you look at the difference between personalization and personification. In fact, there's a TED Talk you could watch by one of our senior researchers. He's called Dario Gill, D-A-R-I-O, Gill, G-I-L-L. And what he does in his TED Talk is he shows a real-life example of using insights based upon data to try and find companies who you might want to buy. Basically, he's looking at an audience that you might want to play with or deal with. But think about the Alex the Kid example. All Alex the Kid is doing is looking at millions of millions of people to try and find an unsigned artist that has exactly the same attributes, tone of voice, sentiment, personality fit, same language, you know, and he fed in a lot of language and a lot of swear words to try and train Watson to find Rhapsody. That's all you're trying to do across social. Now, the issue is, and this is why I paused a little bit, when you're scraping social for some of this sort of stuff, sometimes you're looking at a very, very small cross-section of an audience. In fact, Facebook is, at the most, it's going to be 15% of an audience. If you're looking at Twitter, it's probably going to be less than 8%, maybe even closer to 5%. The majority of those customer conversations are taking place in private messaging apps. That's why looking at visual and voice technologies, so you apply that to something like Instagram, for example. Let's read every single photograph on someone's Instagram and understand the mood that they may be in. And then back to Dario's point, Dario Gill, you could start looking at the mood of an audience in real time. So a bank could be thinking, well, an investor, for example, here's the product that we might want to sell this customer based upon what lives in their database. That could have been taken from interest graphs and economic graphs, or it could be taken from conversations you've had with them. But the mood that they seem to be exhibiting at the moment through downloaded this white paper, searched for this thing, posted this on Instagram, said this on Twitter, the mood that they are now in, and where Watson's able to surface that based upon that free, anonymous, publicly available information, it may be that they're looking for a completely different product. Now, the use cases for that could be anything. That could be recommending a product. It could be predicting, based upon the mood of that person, how many seconds before they leave the website, right? Think about that. Someone lands on your website and we've got a pretty strong understanding that they may want to leave your website in 75 seconds. So you might want to serve them a piece of content or personalized discount in 60 seconds to keep them on and start increasing conversion rates. You can start surfacing the same language in customer service to make sure you've got a better satisfaction quicker. There literally is 1,000 use cases. That's why it's a very long discussion to have to try and answer a quick question. But go and play on those APIs and start looking at some of those things that they're able to do. Social sentiment is absolutely killer. Just remember that some of those social listening tools that we've been using for the last 5 years just don't work in the way that they used to, because those conversations just don't really exist publicly in the way that they used to. Scott Brinker calls it dark social. If you don't know about it, go and search that term. You could search Dark Social, the report that I published last year that goes into a lot more information about this. And Scott Brinker also wrote a book called Hacking Marketing, which speaks to this in a lot more detail as well and shows how things like Watson and AI can help do exactly that. So hope that's useful. Check out those resources. Good question.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. So I think we'll probably leave this as the final question. I realize we've only got about 2 minutes left and we want to be respectful, of course, people's time. We've already taken an hour out of your day already. So the final question, and a great one actually, nice and easy. Do you have a case of competitive analysis using Watson?
Competitive, and I'm not sure what that means. Competitive analysis doing what? Do we know what that is?
Oh, no. So my understanding was that it was competitive analysis, maybe across like different companies or different industries, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I'll point you in two different directions then. I'll point you back to the Dario Gill TED Talk, because what he does in the first 75 seconds of that TED Talk is he shows something that we're never usually allowed to show. And that shows basically how Watson is doing competitive analysis of, I think it's about 5 different companies, trying to understand the differences between them to understand which ones to work with. So that's a great, in that use case, it's trying to figure out which company to buy. But you're basically doing competitive analysis to try and find the differences and nuances between them. Another way that we've done competitive analysis is using something called the News Explorer API. And what News Explorer does, and this is, I'll tweet the link right after this. If you follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Waite, I'll tweet the link so you can go and check it out. News Explorer allows you to put in any topics, any keywords, any companies, any words, and you can compare multiple words, one company with another company, and it shows you all the news articles that are currently taking place across the world, and it shows how they're linked together. And you're able to see patterns and correlations in the middle of that, which also helps, for example, with things like competitive analysis. I sometimes use it for that. There's a lot of different uses of competitive analysis, so those are the two that I will leave you with. Any more that I haven't answered, feel free to ping me on Twitter at Jeremy Way, and I can answer them and point you in the directions of the links. And I think with that, Sean, are we going to share the slides with everybody?
Yeah, we will indeed, mate. So anybody on the call, if you just use the link you used to access this webinar, if you come back, you'll be able to download the entire saved video of today. So everything will be there, and we'll send out a follow-up email.
Let me give you one more recommendation. I love recommending stuff just before you go, as if your reading list isn't big enough. Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. I think it's only about £2.50. I think it's €2.50 as well on iBooks on Apple. You can get it from Amazon. Fantastic book. It's available in paperback. Talks about the future of AI and the implications for humans. And it's a really easy read. It's well worth checking out. So with that, thanks again, everybody. Like Sean said, we love you. We really appreciate your time, taking an hour out of your day. And I hope it was useful and you got something out of it. And we will see you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.